Borla, and you're listening to Funding Rural. Growing up, I was big into 4-H as a kid. I spent time raising pigs and showing horses at the county and state fairs. And I also had the opportunity to build and develop leadership skills that still serve me today. Skills like record keeping, public speaking, and how to lead a group of kids and adults. When Roundhouse has the chance to work directly with young leaders, we always take it. That's what got me so excited when I met Uriel Aguilar Torres. He's in his second year at Oregon Tech with a major in IT and a minor in business, and he's currently working at a company called Material Flow and Conveyor Systems in Donald, Oregon. But I met him when he was the Oregon FFA State Sentinel, a state officer for the program formerly known and what many people remember as the Future Farmers of America. But today's FFA is just that, FFA, a program similar to my experience in 4-H that supports leadership development, community stewardship, and skills that can help enhance the communities where their students live. Young people see different gaps, challenges, and opportunities, and they allow organizations like ours to think innovatively. What surprised me most about Uriel was that he was not doing the traditional FFA project of raising animals or researching certain agricultural practices. His project was about technology. Ultimately, technology is designed to support people and practices and to make our lives easier. Not everyone sees the world of agriculture as connected with the world of IT. Uriel saw firsthand how cutting-edge techno-innovations could support farming practices, and that lit his fire. But he saw that came with challenges, like a lack of broadband or understanding of access to resources. I'd love for you to meet Uriel and learn more about him.
So personally, I didn't raise any animals in FFA. All my friends did. My supervised agricultural experience, or SAE, was working here at this company. Actually, I started out as a first level or tier 1 IT specialist, where I did all the tedious tasks of going to help people and posting some small little updates on our website and social media. And through that, it was how can we better update our website and stuff like that, giving some recommendations for younger people. But my friends who did they showed animals such as lambs, pigs, goats, cows, stuff like that. And that's a lot of hard work from starting out early in the morning to late at night.
Yeah, and I was a 4-H'er 100 years ago, and 4-H and FFA are sort of partners, but FFA is slightly different. But that one thing that we talk about a lot in our 4-H experience is the leadership development that you get through those programs. So talk a little bit about what students get to operate and how they get to learn about those leadership opportunities. And then I'd love to hear about your experience as a state officer. So we can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But I think there's so much more than just the one project, right?
Yeah. So FFA has both career and leadership development events, where those career development events where there's contests such as veterinary science, agricultural sales, marketing, agribusiness, where you're covering all the different types of careers that are available in the agricultural industry and doing those mock events. So for me personally, I competed in the ag sales event where we had to do cold calling, make flyers, sell one of our products that we either invented or we are going to represent that company and make a pitch to a customer and try to convince them to buy our product through our pricing, through our customer service, all the aspects that a salesman would have to do. Or the veterinary science competition where you're having to show how you would give a vaccine to an animal, how you would attach a muzzle to them, what are the different terminology and tool identification as well, identifying diseases and bacteria to those panels of judges, and doing a scale on top of that where you're, depending on the year, sometimes you may be at a clinic, other times you may be out on the farm, depending on the year. But those career development events, those students can find their niche in agriculture, saying, what do I want to work in? Do I want to work in sales, work directly with animals? Do I want to do more farm co-op? There's the co-op contest as well. It basically, almost any career in agriculture, there's a niche where they can find that in those FFA career development events. And the leadership development events, that's public speaking, whether it be extemporaneous public speaking or prepared public speaking, where they're planning a 10-minute memorized speech, or extemporaneous speaking, where they get one sentence and have to speak for 5 minutes on that topic. And on top of that, there's various other public speaking events that students can compete in, such as job interview contests to get those students career ready. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without FFA, to be honest. It's a one in a million experience, I'd say.
Okay, so state office, that's a big deal. Like, it's a big
It
deal in the
it
world of
is.
FFA. I want to hear all about how it's a big deal.
So in order to become a state officer, you have to go through about a 3-day interview process, and they're interviewing round robin style, your extemporaneous public speaking, your prepared public speaking, even how can you read off of a piece of paper, stuff like that. How well do you work in a group? If you get elected, you hit the road that same week. You're going to Corvallis and starting your onboarding. So you get one day at home after you get elected, and then it's off to Corvallis, where you go through a 1 week training to get you prepared and say, all right, here's your basic roles as a state officer. Here's the deep dive into Oregon FFA, how we operate. And then you're back in high school. Because you got elected your senior year of high school right before spring break.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness. And then you travel, like you are on the road because it's sort of like a gap year, right? Most
it
students don't
is.
then go into college. They wait a year.
For Oregon FFA, state officers aren't allowed to go to school.
Okay.
They have to take a full gap year for it. So after state fair, you hit the road onto 10 more camps,
Hmm.
and they're all back to back from September to early October. Every day you're at a camp, which is both exhausting, and you get tired, but it's rewarding at the same time, because you're getting to spend time with those members who elected you, and the members who you got to know before state office, and those new chapter members who maybe you've never met before throughout your time in high school when you were in FFA, but you're getting to build those strong connections at a camp. Because for me, I think sitting around the campfires where we really started building those strong connections and keeping in touch with those members, whether it be through social media or texting each other. Because for me, I know throughout the year, my year as a state officer, I'd call, like, say, hey, Evan, how are you doing? It's been a while since we last talked. It's good to talk to members because they're the main reason that you run. They are the reason that you run for state office, because you want to make an impact on them and the organization that made an impact on you.
Yeah, talk about additional leadership skills too, like being able to just reach out and say, "Hey, what's happening in your area? I'd like to know more about, Oregon's a big state, right?
Yeah.
We've got different, especially when we talk about agriculture, right? You got cranberry bogs on the south coast, and then you got beef cattle up in northeast Oregon, and hay and wheat fields, and the around the Columbia River Gorge, plus the orchards. Oh my goodness, it's all different.
Yeah, talking to students who live in rural Eastern Oregon or who live in the Portland metro, completely different lives. Being in what I would say call the members' territory, because it's their home. You're getting to visit them, and it's a whole nother experience. And that goes for every part of the state, because each of the FFA pickup trucks puts almost 40,000 miles on in one year of just traveling to different corners of the state. It's just a whole nother experience, unlike no other. During state office, I also got the opportunity to shear a sheep for the first time ever.
Are you changing careers? Are you gonna be a sheep shearer?
I don't know.
That's hard work, I tell you. That is
It is.
hard work.
Well, after I was done, I said, dude, your sheep looks terrible. Sorry. and he and he tricked me. He said, Uriel, I'm about to go in the show ring. And I said, oh, no.
Oh, no.
And he was playing with me, but I got so worried because the sheep out in the show ring looked perfect.
Yeah.
Those kids work really hard to make their sheep look nice and clean and well trimmed. And then
Yeah.
they're doing a terrible job in shearing that kid's sheep.
Well, you have to give him a bow or something he could put on to cover.
I don't think there's a bow
Oh,
big enough.
uh, talk about an opportunity as a young person to be able to go and travel and build those connections and build that network. And now you're at Oregon Tech. What are you studying at Oregon Tech? Remind me one more time.
I'm studying information technology with a minor of business, and I'm thinking about dual majoring with cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, and you want to really focus that work in agriculture, right? And
I
sort of that
do.
interconnection.
After I graduate from Oregon Tech, I'm hoping to start my own managed service provider, providing technology and internet services for rural agribusinesses.
That's really great. I think that's an issue that we hear about all the time. I know we've talked recently about a program and a paper you were writing around rural broadband access, and we're hearing that from federal partners, from state partners in almost every state about the interconnectivity and the lack of broadband access for so many rural communities.
Well, I'll give a firsthand example. Here at work, we're in Donald, Oregon. We're about 20 minutes south of Wilsonville and 30 minutes north of Salem. We have two internet service providers, and none of them provide high speed, reliable internet. We were without internet for about 2 days here,
Hmm.
and internet that was cutting in and out for about a week. And in order for us to get a reliable internet connection, it was going to cost us $25,000 in construction and permitting costs. We're in a town of about 700 people, and if they only have two internet service providers, none of them being stable, imagine towns and people who live even farther away from I-5 and live in rural Oregon or just rural America in general. The USDA on their broadband page, they say that 22.3% of Americans in rural America lack high-speed internet.
So, talk a little bit about what it's like being a young person, sort of crossing the bridge of agriculture, engineering, agriculture, and tech. What does that look like?
You don't see a lot of it. Uh, well, you see it in big corporations, and agricultural operations uh, that are close to enterprise level, but those small to mid-size operations, you don't see a lot of technical implementations. It's still the pen and paper, or they're using a spreadsheet on their computer.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of ways that you can automate those tasks to keep track for you. Like I went to a fully robotic dairy over in Eastern Vale,
Mhm.
Oregon, and I was just like surprised by the amount of technology that they've implemented there. It's like this is great where they have a tracker on each of their cattle saying, "Nope, you can't be milked yet," because they told us their cattle are never forced to go get milked. It's all on their own.
Hmm.
And if the machine knows that okay, they just got milked 10 minutes ago, it's still too soon, we're not going to let them in. And I was just like, that is amazing. The technology and the software behind that is it's a long time to develop, but I can't imagine what the cost was on that operation because it was a family farm too. So
Yeah, well, and dairies are so. I remember again 100 years ago when I was in school at Oregon State with an ag degree, we all had to participate and go and milk at the dairy at 4 a.m. That was part of the gig, is you had to show up at 4 a.m. And the manpower and the man hours of managing smaller family operations are really, really challenging. And that's we're seeing sort of the average American farmer is an older person now, right? I think what they say in Oregon, it's over 65. I think nationally it's like 58. So because of those, it's hard on your body, it's hard on your lifestyle. You don't have all these other options. Like you don't get to go on vacation when you're a farmer or a rancher. You have programs and projects. So to add in some of those technology pieces where it gives you a little bit of a little bit of a buffer.
and well, sometimes it's even they don't know that they're missing out on those opportunities because they've never witnessed it.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's oh well, this is the way we've done it, so this is the way it has to be done. I know here at work we're always trying to find new strategies to make things easier on our employees, and one of them was on digital marketing. And I told my boss is the owner of the company. I said, well, why don't we implement this smart feature that we've never used, but it's been around for almost 10 years? And he said, well, I've never heard of it. And I said,
Hmm.
yeah, it'll cut down on a lot of those costs, or we can use those extra resources and move them somewhere else. And he said, oh, well, no one's ever told me that, so I just thought this is the way it had to be done. There's all these different sectors of technology, and I guess for me, I knew people who worked in IT already for businesses. So it's like, yeah, I want to work with that. I want to help bring both hardware and software implementations into businesses. And when I joined FFA, that's when I said, okay, I don't want to just do it for any business. I want to do it specifically for agribusinesses because they're a community who needs those resources the most. They're the underserved community.
I love that. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that decision process. Like, what was that for you that was like, this is it. This is what lit my fire right here.
During state office, I went and visited 3 Mile Canyon farms over in Northeast Oregon, and we were talking to their IT manager there, and he was saying how all of their irrigation systems are completely managed by their computer, and they had like this huge, massive, like I'd call like a control center. Um, and I have a picture of it on my phone that I took. I was just in shock, where there's someone managing that system at all times. They don't go out and check it, but the hardware and the systems tell them everything about that irrigation pipe or the sprinkler head. And I was just like, okay, this is the industry that I want to work in for sure. I want to start a business because this is a large. 3 Mile Canyon is not a small operation. It's
Yeah.
pretty big. And I said, but I want to work with smaller businesses because I want to have that more of a personal touch.
Yeah. Well, and I think recognizing where there can be improvements, enhancements, opportunities to support those folks that you mentioned are oftentimes underserved just because of where they are or where they're located. It's really great. I think this show in particular talks about rural space and how we can better support rural and indigenous communities through funding. So through all of your travels and all of your time at school and all of your many years of life, tell me about your experiences in rural and how you see additional support being able to be come in and help those spaces.
Well, it's a lot of the times for like my research paper that I did on rural broadband, most of the funding comes privately, but it's educating those communities on where they can get that funding from. Because a lot of the times they're looking locally, or they go on to their farm bureau or the ODA or USDA, like here in Oregon, and say a small community or small rural community or a small agribusiness went to the USDA's website and said, "Oh, well, applications are closed now. They don't know when. Okay, I'm never going to check it out again." Because
Mm.
that, like, for me, that's it's like, oh, well, this opportunity is closed now. I'm not going to come back. I'll maybe a few months, few years, I'll look into it again. I'd say educating those communities on like, hey, these are all of the resources available to you right now. It's kind of like scholarships for
Mm.
college.
Yeah.
It's hard finding them, ones that you qualify for, and there's thousands of websites on the internet that say, here are all the scholarships, and you're like, well, okay, this one doesn't apply to me, this one doesn't apply to me, this one doesn't apply to me. I don't meet all the qualifications for this one. And it's the same for funding rural internet access or tech. You know, a lot of times they don't meet all of those requirements. So they're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm done. And you kind of like say, okay, well, I'm done searching for now. I'll look later. I already have this little bit of funding here. So creating a well-known place where agribusiness can search for those resources that are available to them, and one that's not just full of spam.
How do we filter through the garbage to get to what we really need?
Personally, I think the biggest need is that having that one uh, secure and reliable resource available, saying, "Hey, we're gonna bridge this gap." Because for the Roundhouse Foundation, I was introduced to it through Betsy with
Yeah.
Oregon FFA when they gave us a list of here are all the businesses and foundations that we're going to visit with, and we all did our individual research on it. And I was like, "There's a lot of cool things that the Roundhouse Foundation is doing." And it's stuff like I'm like, I had no idea that you provided so many opportunities and resources for those rural communities. And I bet I'm not the only one who has trouble finding those resources like that or hearing about resources like that.
So, lastly, I know we're just about at time. I'd love to talk with you a little bit about you represented Oregon FFA. You were really interested in supporting agricultural businesses. You live on the I-5 corridor, which is a really oftentimes we don't think of as agricultural space. How do we bridge in 2 minutes? How do we bridge the urban rural divide? You're going to solve the world
Oh,
today. Solve the crisis.
if we had a program between people who lived in urban areas and rural areas, like for me, like I live in a town of 2,000 people. I got to connect with an FFA member over in North Clackamas, and we still talking because he's really into tech too, but also helping out his school's land lab, and I just found it awesome how he was able to implement all these different technologies into the barn and greenhouse to feed all the thousands of pounds of feed over to their cattle. So creating a program, I don't know, FFA really was that program for me, but not everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah. So building those opportunities for folks, whether they're uh, old like me or fresh off out of the school gate, to be able to connect and know that there's opportunity to work together. I think that's really excellent.
Yeah.
Other thoughts you want to share, my friend?
Just thank you for giving me this opportunity and helping me with the research project and connecting me with those resources, or those connections that you had. It was amazing. It helped me out. My teacher was surprised because she said, "How are you getting so many resources that get just given to you?"
Oh, well, it's always been so fun to talk to you. I mean, I remember when we first met, I was so blown away by, like, I asked all of the state officers, I said, okay, what's your project? And I can't even remember. Somebody had goats, somebody had a dairy cow, somebody had beef cattle. And then you said, I'm doing IT. And I was like, oh, I need more information. I need more. Tell me more about this. And I think it's such a, I love 4-H. I love FFA. I love these youth development leadership programs because, you know, I've stood up. I've had to stand in front of up to 4,000 people and do presentations and public speaking, and I get stopped frequently. And they're like, "Oh, that was great. How did you learn how to do that?" And it's always 4-H for me. And that you mentioned earlier, it's like FFA. I wouldn't be who I was without FFA. Programs like these are so impactful.
Like recent example is I interviewed to be on student government for Oregon Tech, and I got a phone call 2 weeks later, and they said, based off of your experience in leadership in FFA, we want to offer you the position of student body president. And I said, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, but if it weren't for that year-long experience I had with Oregon FFA state office, I wouldn't have this opportunity for this upcoming school year.
That's
So
amazing. Why did I not know that? That's so cool. Congratulations. Oh my
thank
gosh.
you.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, and I'm hopeful that opportunities like that continue to show up. And I know how hard you work, and I know how dedicated you are to the work that you're doing, and so thrilled to have folks like you as part of our future, not only for rural communities, but for the world as a whole. I'm so impressed with you. So thank you for spending time today.
All right, thank you.
I was so glad that Uriel reached out to discuss his most recent research paper about broadband. Not only that he reached out and asked and leaned on that connection that he had built when he was in state office, but that he asked about something that he thought I might have information that could support his paper. So we talked about the work that Roundhouse has done. I was like, oh my gosh, we can totally talk about broadband. We have a partnership with the USDA and a technical assistance provider to help support communities be able to access some Project Reconnect dollars. So I was able to get him connected to the state director and other partners that we work with and the communities on the ground. So there's all sorts of work that's happening that he got to learn about and then be able to inform his work moving forward. You know, often in the world of agriculture, we hear that we know that there are so many different innovations that are happening. But when we think about the world of climate tech or the world of innovation, they don't always think about agriculture or forestry or farming. And it's really interesting because the more that we can elevate those things and that they're happening in these other places, the more we can bring more dollars and more attention. We support a climate tech entrepreneur program through the foundation. And we always talk about, well, what's happening out in the field? Or there was a great program down in Klamath that supported young people developing a collar for cows so they could graze in wide open spaces and be able to be tracked a little bit differently. Uriel talked about the dairy that had an automatic collar on their cows. So there's all these different innovations that are happening. And how are they impacting the world of climate tech? How are we impacting green energy? Those are ways that we can get engaged and really start thinking differently. But most importantly, how do we bring young voices to the table? Philanthropy loves to be able to talk about community and bring community together, but how are we bringing those young folks in and encouraging their voices? There's some great research out there that talks about youth service and the need to engage at a younger level in a way that makes them feel like they're included in conversations for the long term. Thanks again for listening to Funding Rural. We'll have all sorts of information about FFA and other youth development programs, as well as a transcript from today's episode at fundingrural.com.